It's my privilege today to introduce Natalie Berkman. Natalie trained as both a literary scholar and a mathematician. She completed her PhD in French literature at Princeton with a dissertation on the mathematical methods of the Houlipo. That's Ouvroir de littérature potentielle, pardon my French. Recently selected as the winner of the 2019 Peter Lang Young Scholars Competition in French Studies. Natalie is the Directrice pédagogique, the academic manager at the SAE Institute Paris, which is a creative media college that specializes in audio, film, and video game production. And she has a new book coming out next year. Her monograph is Houlipo and the Mathematics of Literature. And it's coming out May 2021 with Peter Lang. So Natalie, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's really great to have you. I'm really glad to be able to have this conversation. So we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the past few months, and I really love a lot of the stuff that you're doing, a lot of the conversations we've had. And one of the things that I think is really neat about your story that is kind of rare, I think, maybe it's probably not rare, but maybe it's just rare because of the people I talk to, is I don't meet as many academics who stay in kind of connected to education in different ways. So it's really neat that you've kind of kept that foot in, like, toe in the door, as it were, in education. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But first, I'm wondering if you could kind of introduce yourself a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about your background in academia and kind of what led you there and where you came from.
Sure. I think it's funny. I never intended to end up in academia. I'm the first person in my family, I think, to get a PhD. Got a few doctors, but it's the other kind of doctor, the kind who are just heroes now because of everything that's going on. Well, they were heroes before too. So I'm the big kind of doctor, I guess. But the reason I ended up pursuing the PhD was because when I was in college, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do or what I wanted to study. I went to Johns Hopkins because they've got this great creative writing undergraduate program. And I also wanted to study math. So I was double majoring in creative writing and math, which doesn't seem to match really. Yeah. And when I was taking a French class for just a language requirement, I mentioned to my teacher that those were my two majors. And she said, "Oh, that's so weird. Have you heard of the Houlipo?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And she goes, "Oh, authors like Raymond Queneau and Italo Calvino." And I said, "Oh my God, I love those authors." Yeah. And she goes, "Yeah, they were friends. They were part of this group together. They write using math." And I thought, that's really cool. And so I started looking into it and I realized they were still around. So I decided to spend a semester abroad in Paris. And I know that it's almost a cliche to say a semester abroad changed your life, but it really did. I mean, I never thought I'd speak another language fluently. I mean, I grew up in a very thoroughly monolingual household in the middle of upstate New York. But I got there, I took all these classes in these French universities. I took flute lessons with a member of the orchestra here in Paris, which is where I live now. And I met the members of this group called the Houlipo, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And when I came back to college to finish my last year, I asked the teacher if she thought I might be able to do a master's, because I was really interested in studying this group and figuring out what exactly they were doing with math and why and how. And she told me, "Oh, you shouldn't do a master's. It'll cost you a fortune. You should do a PhD. They'll pay you." And I thought, well, nothing sounds better than to be paid to read books. Yeah. So that's how I ended up at Princeton, where my advisor, David Bellos, was just an amazing scholar who had not only translated some of the most famous works by one of the most famous members of the Houlipo, Georges Perec, but he also wasn't afraid of math because his son was a mathematician. So I had really a great time in graduate school. I know a lot of people don't necessarily. I really enjoyed it all, and I consider myself very lucky that even though academia wasn't exactly the path that I chose to pursue, it got me to where I wanted to be. Now I get to live in Paris and I've got this amazing job, and before the pandemic, everything was going great. But I think it's still going fine for me at the moment, knock on wood.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And it's one of the things I've thought a lot about recently is actually, and I think more PhDs should think about it, is like the thing that actually leads you to do the PhD. Sometimes like people think like, I want to be an academic, and really what they want is to live abroad or to be able to think about interesting things, or to be able to read interesting things, or whatever, you know, like there are a lot of different reasons why people go down that path of academia. Teaching is another common one. Like some people just want to teach, right?
It's so true. I know that when I was looking at graduate school, the thing that I found the most enticing was that in any French program, I would be able to get to spend a year in Paris,
Yeah.
or that I would be able to learn other languages. I remember I was looking simultaneously at a bunch of options. I was looking at doing something like Teach for America, because through college I had been working with refugee kids and I found it extremely rewarding. And I loved working with kids and teaching. I was looking into careers I could get with my math degree, because let's face it, that was probably the most the most employable of my degrees. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to lose my French. I don't want to lose this opportunity to travel. I remember the whole semester I had spent in Paris. I was trying, I barely slept. I was trying to do as much as humanly possible, because I kept thinking this might be my last chance,
Yeah.
which is an
Yeah.
awful thing to think at 20.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. And it's, yeah, like that travel, and it resonates for me too, because I also lived in France and Germany and Greece during my doctorate. And I had written about it on a blog post the other day, and somebody said, like, how on earth did you afford to do that? And I was like, well, I got paid to do it. Like I got extra money to go travel. And
Exactly.
like,
I got
it
to
was,
live in, I got to spend a summer in Avignon, a summer in Italy, a summer in Germany, a whole year in France.
yeah.
And I
So
didn't
for all the
spend a dime
problems with
on
the
it.
academy, yeah, for all the problems with the academy, like that's one perk, I guess, while you're studying, at least, not necessarily after, but yeah, that you can do that kind of stuff, right?
And it really, I'll never regret it. I feel like I got to spend all of my 20s, or a lot of my 20s, doing things that I just really loved to do, that travel
Yeah.
and learning languages and immersing myself in different cultures, and reading and reading things that I wanted to. That
Yeah.
I feel like that was the right age to do it.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's interesting. So coming back to you in academia, did you want to have an academic job? Like, did you go in the job market? Did you just decide right away not to? Like, how did that kind of pan out?
I was a bit undecided. I definitely wasn't averse to going into academia, and I went on the job market actually twice. Um, but I had a sort of two body problem, but not two body in the normal sense. I was in a long distance relationship with a non-academic in France,
Yeah.
and he and I both wanted to make sure that we could be together after this was over. So we were looking into ways. We ended up getting married after my first year on the job market, because we realized it would be easier for me to come to France or for him to come to the U.S. if we were married.
Mm, okay.
Um, so my first year on the job market, when I knew that I could still get another year of funding, I just basically did academic job market. I didn't apply to any non-academic jobs, just to test the waters. I ended up a finalist with what would have been my dream academic job, a
Mm,
tenure track position at a small liberal arts college. Really good. I loved the campus visit. I loved the students. From what I understand, I was their second choice, and I didn't get the job. And I think that was really important, because it showed me exactly what I wanted. And
mm,
the following year, I applied very broadly, academic and non-academic. And at the end, I was offered actually two postdocs, the job I took in Paris, and I had a campus visit scheduled at another school in Alabama. And I remember I didn't even, once I had the job in Paris, I didn't even want to think about going to Alabama. So I just didn't go to the campus visit. I considered the postdocs because they would have been fun. They were really interesting opportunities, but at the end of the day, I didn't really want to postpone living with my husband. I
yeah.
didn't really want to do that for something that had no real guarantee. And I think it was
Yeah.
really important that I was a finalist for my dream academic job the year before, because it took away that aura of academic jobs for me. I saw,
Mm,
okay, I want the 2-2 teaching load. I want the research funding. I want this excellent sort of school with this excellent kind of students. And I didn't want something. I wanted to be in a location that I wanted to live in, where I was close to family, closer to people who I knew, and that Alabama job. I mean, I'm sure Alabama is perfectly fine. Ironically, my husband would have been perfectly happy moving to Alabama, because that's where he learned English. But I'd never been to Alabama, and it was very far away from all of my family, and it had a 4-4 teaching load, and I would have been the only French teacher there. I would have been just in charge of everything, and it just seemed very intimidating at the time. I didn't know all the details of the job I ended up taking in Paris. I suppose if I had, I would have found that intimidating too, but ignorance is bliss. I ended up taking it, and I love it. So.
That's awesome. I want to ask you more about that in a minute, but first I was going to say, first of all, the one thing that I was just going to comment on that's funny is somebody said it to me. It was after I left academia, but somebody had said, "Do you know how ludicrous it is that you would just kind of go wherever there was a job basically and live your life based on that? Like you don't get to decide where you want to live. It's like if the job is in Alaska or if it's in Hawaii or if it's in Wisconsin, like you're going there, right?" And it
Exactly.
was funny, like it didn't hit me until after, like that's absurd. Like you should decide where you want to live and live there, but like you just anything for the job, right?
I had a really good friend, one of my colleagues at Princeton, while I was in graduate school, who said something that's really stuck with me. She's actually Canadian. She said, as far as she's concerned, there's three things that are really important. One, where you live. Two, what you're doing. And three, who you're with. And that could be, you know, your partner, your family, your friends. And I remember she had this very refreshing, like pragmatic attitude about it. She said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And
That's
I just
awesome.
remember thinking, okay, you know, that's why I ultimately decided to go with that Paris job. At the time, I didn't know much about it. I thought actually it would be a boring job. It definitely wasn't, but I thought it wasn't going to be anywhere near as stimulating as an academic job, and it sort of felt bittersweet to turn down a chance at that academic career, that academic dream, in order to move to Paris. But I kept thinking, just like she said, you know, living in Paris, a place where I know people, a place where I've
Yeah.
got my partner, a place where I love. And so the place, I've got the people, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And it turns out I liked the job too. So
That's really cool. So I want to ask one more thing that kind of just jumped out at me when you were talking about your visit to in your first year in the market, your visit to the small liberal arts college. You said it clarified what you wanted. Can you like clarify for me what you meant by that? I think you kind of alluded to it, but
I think it's something that most graduate students don't necessarily, I don't know, think about or verbalize, because it almost feels it's absurd to think about what you'd want in a job. You just like you said, you go where the job is, you apply to everything, you apply as broadly as possible. And that's what I had done that year. And I applied to that job just like I applied to every job that was available, even loosely in my fields that year. And when I got the email saying that I was invited for an interview, eh, I remember I was shocked, and I started thinking about it more and going, wow, that's really my dream job. And I
mm,
hadn't really thought much about what my dream job would be, because in my head, it was just, you'd be lucky to have a job.
mm. So
And
in terms of what,
that's not a great way to think, obviously. I mean, I think we should be more empowered than that. We should all think that we're intelligent, capable people. That's why we went into the PhD in the first
after
place, and we
like
worked
15
hard
years
to
of
get
higher education?
it.
Yeah.
Yet that certainly was my mindset. Was I've never done anything. I have no experience. Everyone on the job market has way more experience than I do. I was
Mm,
very young too. I finished my PhD at 28, but I was actually only, I believe I was only 26 when I had that first interview, and 27 when I had that campus visit.
okay.
So I was
Yeah.
extremely young. I had started my PhD young, and yeah, I had this feeling in my gut. I'd just be lucky to get a job, and I that's why I say it was important. It was sad. I was
Mm,
devastated when I didn't get that job, but I think it was important for me to see that I had desires of my own.
mm,
I didn't just want to get a tenure track job in a place I didn't want to live,
yeah.
just because that's what my department expected of me.
Hmm. Interesting. So it sounds like even at that point, you were already starting to kind of. It's interesting you had. I never had a campus visit. Like it wasn't something that ever happened for me. So it's interesting to hear that. Like, yeah, that kind of like both the clarity and I can imagine the pain that probably came along with that. With the rejection was probably incredibly difficult to go through at the time. But also it's really interesting that it helped to kind of shape your lens for what you wanted moving forward. That's a really neat way to look at it. Um,
Absolutely. Especially before that, I had been dabbling, looking at different possibilities outside of the academy. I had done this initiative that at the time was new at Princeton, but they've since really amped up, which is great, called University Administrative Fellowship. So I had an opportunity to work a little bit in university administration. I was working as a resident graduate student in one of the residential colleges. I did the MLA Pro Seminar, which was a great way to see different kinds of careers that were open. But I was doing that all just sort of on the side so that I could have that plan B. And in the end, my plan B turned into a plan A, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't regret.
It sounds like you thought about it fairly early though. Like you were kind of thinking about it, at least from that first year in the job market, or were you thinking right from the beginning that I need to have a plan B, or how did you kind of approach that?
I think if I remember correctly, my third year of graduate school, I was sharing the teaching office with one of my older colleagues who was on the job market, and he was extremely, I guess, negative about it. It all turned out well for him. I think he's almost got tenure at this point, but at the time he was very realistic about the situation. And I asked him, "What would you do if you could go back to where I am now and do it again?" And he gave me a bunch of advice, both academic and not. And actually, the first piece of advice he said was to go to the Career Center. And so I think in my third year, I started just very casually going to the Career Center and meeting the people there, talking about different types of careers and thinking about it. But I didn't start considering it very seriously until my fifth year in the program. And then I started getting experience, especially in my sixth year, because I had a fellowship. Which, in academia should be, yay, I had a fellowship, but actually it was much less than what Princeton usually paid the grad students. And I was looking at making a lot less than I had in other years, and I was a little worried about that. So I started doing side gigs, started working part-time for ed tech companies, doing a little bit of content and curriculum design and development, a little bit of English teaching, and I ended up making more money that year on my fellowship than I had in the other years. And that gave me a really good outlook, I think. And a lot to talk about in non-academic job interviews.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so now I have another question that I wasn't planning to ask you, but like, how did you go about getting those side gigs? Like, it's something that so first of all, sorry, let me just back up and say, like, your whole approach to non-academic work and thinking about it that early is something I wish I had done, because I didn't until I left, and then I just didn't have any options. I had to figure it out, which obviously I did. But had I started years earlier, my second or third year rather than my fifth year as I was about to graduate, it would have really changed things a lot. And I think that's one of the hardest things and it's something I try to do in some of the posts on Roostervane, is to try to get people to think, like, if you're still in a degree, you can start preparing now. You don't have to wait until the tenure track job market doesn't work after your fourth postdoc, right? Like,
absolutely.
So it's really interesting to hear you say that. And then the other thing is, like, I'd love to see more students working on the side. It's not always possible because of different immigration restrictions or different funding restrictions. Like, I know it's complicated, but I'm curious now to know, like, how you did that. So where did you find opportunities? How did that work?
I was really looking for opportunities. I was looking on LinkedIn for different types of contractual work that I could do with specifically ed tech, because I thought with my math background and I knew a little bit of text encoding, a little bit of Python, I thought that would be a natural outcome for me. I found this Chinese company that specialized in teaching English to children. They just wanted people with teaching experience. It was a pretty basic job, but I think it really was very useful. It didn't pay super well, but I did a lot of hours, and it really taught me sort of best practices for teaching online. So, COVID hit last year, and it wasn't new to me to instruct my faculty in how they could teach more effectively online, because I'd been doing it for years already, even with Zoom. I'm not sure that company used Zoom, but I ended up working for another company later that did. I remember the content and curriculum development. It was a friend of mine who got me the gig. She had been working for them too. They specifically had sought her out because she was a native French speaker to do recordings. And they had me write some texts in French, just because I'm not a native speaker, so they didn't want my accent in the recordings. But I ended up working that whole summer with them. I also found a similar thing with study.com. I wrote an article or two for them. Wasn't much money, but I liked the idea of getting that experience.
Yeah.
And then because I had done that and put it on my LinkedIn, this other Chinese company contacted me in my final year and asked if I wanted to develop courses in digital humanities for them and teach them to group workshops. And that was really cool. And the pay was much better than the other stuff I was doing. And I've been working with them ever since. And it's been really, really great. They're very open and they're just delightful colleagues, and they give me free rein. I get to, design and teach the courses that I would have done if I had ended
That's
up
cool.
in an academic job. But I get to do it to students all over the world.
That's really cool. And there's something to be said for that freedom too, right? Like that's a lot of what we want, is just the freedom to like create things and do kind of teach what we want to teach or whatever. That's really neat.
That's why I haven't stopped. And then after that, even I got another side gig that I still work on today. I'm an application mentor for an ed tech that's in application consulting.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I want to ask you about your job now. So aside from all the side gigs, I know you also have a full-time job. So tell me a bit about what it is and kind of what you do. And
Absolutely. So when I applied to this job, it's funny. It's an international company. It's called SAE, which originally stood for School of Audio Engineering, but we've branched out since. It's been around for years and years and years. The one in Paris has been around for over 27 years, and it's the leader in audio education for people who want to be audio technicians or music producers and things like that. But we've since added programs in film production and video game production. Um, the job is not what I expected. Since it's this sort of international company, the job posting was actually written by our regional management that was in Barcelona. The job posting was in English. I didn't even know if I was going to have to work in French.
oh, okay.
And ironically enough, I found this job through the Inside of Higher Ed job search feature.
Really?
I had put in a like a sort of what's I'm forgetting my English, the like automatic email whenever a new job was posted that
Like
it mentioned
email reminders or whatever.
yeah, whenever a new job was posted that
Notifications.
included the word French, I
Okay.
assumed that would be assistant professor of French or postdoc in French. But I got this one. It's an academic coordinator was the title that they had put on the job ad, and the description was pretty vague. It made it sound like they just wanted someone who was super organized. And so I applied, and because it was in Paris, and I made a point of saying in every interview and writing my cover letter how I could get a visa. I didn't need anyone to sponsor it because I was married to a French citizen. And in the end, I got the job. Then I arrived my first day, and I find out that even though the regional management had called this a coordinator position, French law basically stipulated that my title was Directrice pédagogique, which is a management level position, and that I was actually the number 2 at the school, and that I was in charge of everything related to academics, which was a bit of a shock. But I think to be honest, the PhD prepared me a lot for it, because at the end of the day, doing a PhD is really intense project management.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I had to do there. I had to get the lay of the land. I had to see sort of where the strengths were, where the weaknesses were, how we could find things that were missing and fix them. In fact, one of the first things I had found was that in the months before I had arrived, the position had actually been empty. And there was a lot of sort of administrative organizational things that just weren't there. Students were missing grades. A substantial amount of students were missing grades. People weren't putting the planning and the course schedule into the system. Students sometimes didn't have a teacher in front of them. And the first line of my contract was ensure academic quality. And so I thought, I'm going to be sitting in on these cool courses and video games and audio. And actually, the first thing I realized after a few weeks there was there's no academic quality if the students don't have their grades. There's no academic quality if they don't know where their classroom is. There's no academic quality if we're missing teachers. And it might have seemed like some boring tasks that I had to do, but at the end of the day, they were really important tasks. And it was also really useful and nice to see that I could affect change. And that's on a big level right then and there, right at the beginning. And then from there on, I was able to sort of make the job my own. I was able to come up with a system for a sort of a calendar, because I managed the department heads. So I was able to come up with sort of this academic calendar where during this period we do this task, during this period we focus on this task. I was able to start observing the classes and running pedagogical workshops for the teachers. I was able to start doing a whole bunch of cool things. And in addition to that, I mean, since it's also a really cool place filled with cool people who follow their passion and do creative stuff, I got to meet and meet super cool people and participate in really interesting events. Like I got to accompany our film students to the Cannes Film Festival. I got to serve as a simultaneous translator for J-Lo's producer.
That's awesome.
Sarah Joy George, she's really nice. And I got free pass to Paris Games Week. Just these things that I never thought that I'd ever get to do. I remember thinking the PhD was going to be the high point of my life. And it's true that I really enjoyed my PhD and I enjoyed the opportunities I got from it. But I never got to go to the Cannes Film Festival.
That's awesome. I was gonna say like maybe when they when somebody does a film on, but I can't remember the name of the thing from your book. What was the acronym? Was why?
Houlipo.
Yeah, Houlipo. Yeah. So I was like, maybe somebody will do a film on that, and then you can go back to that. Anyway, but no, it's a good point, and there's so much of what you're saying is resonating with me, and a couple things in particular. So first of all, I love that you were thrown in the deep end. That's like something really, and it resonates with my experience too, because when I jumped into my first job, I was managing 5 or 6 projects at once. Each of them were worth about $100,000 with multiple stakeholders, and just like, holy crap, this is not. So in a way, and you said like your PhD prepared you, and in a way it did, but also it's like, you got to step up, right?
Exactly. And it was, and I think that's a really good way to put it. The PhD prepared me in the sense that I had the skills to look at a complex situation, identify the problems, and come up with a timeline that would allow me to fix the problems I saw in an appropriate way, in an appropriate manner, and within a budget. But what I think that the PhD didn't necessarily prepare me for was the mindset. It was really hard at first. I mean, when I arrived and I found out I was in charge of so many things, my first thought was, I can't do this. And I did. And I hope I'll never feel that way again, because that was the wrong way to feel. And I think it was the situation itself, like you said, being thrown into the deep end, having these people looking at me and saying, okay, what should we do? That made me, it forced me to get out of that mindset, which I think is unfortunately a bit common with people doing PhDs, because the entire notion of, especially in the humanities, PhD work in the humanities, you're working on a project that's sort of your pet project that you're passionate about, that you hope other people will be passionate about, but that in the end, not many people are going to read. Whereas in this job, there were 700 students in the school, and I needed to make sure they got their diplomas on time, despite what had happened before. I needed to make sure that they had teachers in front of them. I needed to make sure that we weren't overspending so that we could get our salaries. I mean, it was empowering.
That's a really good word. I love that word, empowering. And I was thinking the other word that I wrote down is initiative, that like you took initiative and obviously just kind of made it your own and saw what needed to be done and did it. And that's an interesting thing. And again, like it comes back to like thinking about PhD preparation. I'm not sure if did your PhD prepare you to take the kind of initiative, or is it just something in you? Like, is it a personality thing, or did you just kind of have to step up on that too and just kind of do it? Or
I think part of what it prepared me for it was what I mentioned before, when I was on that fellowship year and when I had to start taking initiative because I was really paranoid about money, and the fact that I started doing all of these projects all at once and juggling things. I think that really prepared me, just that idea that I want to get more and I want to get it now. I think that helped me. I don't know that the PhD didn't, though. I mean, it's true that when you're a graduate student, when you're doing a doctoral program, you should be taking initiative all the time. You should be asking questions at conferences. You should be trying to talk with the people afterwards. You should be networking. I mean, it's not just a dirty word for outside of the academy, it's a dirty word for inside of the academy, and it shouldn't be, because it's important to be doing that. I know that some of the best work I did during my PhD was because I reached out and I said, hey, I'd like to participate in this. Do you have an opening? I did an archival encoding and transcription project with the Houlipo archives, and that was just, I wrote to someone. I said, hey, I'm going to be in Paris next year. Can I help you with this? And I started working on it, and they saw that I was really into it because it was also the topic of my dissertation. So they said, would you like to manage the team of transcribers? Would you like to do this? Would you like to learn how to do the encoding yourself? And I got all of these opportunities just because of that initiative. And I'm pretty sure that's how I got the postdocs, how I got interviews when I was on the academic job market. So I think initiative is something that you should have in an academic setting or not. But yeah, I think sometimes it's something that can be snuffed out of you a little bit, when you're in school for a bit too long.
Yeah. And I do, like, I certainly hear students who are like, wait for their supervisor's permission to do things or whatever. But
I still hear horror
and the thing,
stories like that. I have a friend whose supervisors won't let her defend. They say she's not ready. She's out of funding.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times.
I've heard that so many
times. Like, it's going to take you 2 more years to get ready. Like, I know.
And you just need to support yourself. Anyways. With what?
Yeah, exactly. And like, at what point is this going to be ready? Like, just some kind of nebulous point in the future when your supervisor just happens to think it's good enough. Like, anyways, it's a whole different conversation. But I was gonna mention just like what I'm hearing, and a lot of what you're saying is like initiative, and then it's like the thing that I love, that I've thought a lot about since I left, and especially like the more I interview PhDs who are like really successful, I really love like seeing how a PhD goes hand in hand with leadership skills. And I think that a lot of people don't expect to be leaders, but I had like, it was something I was thinking about as I wrote my book. And I was thinking about how, like, when a doctor comes into your room, you know, if you're at the doctor's office, they come into your room, you want them to be like, okay, here's what's wrong with you, and here's how to fix it, right? And I realized that, like, it's kind of the same for somebody with a PhD too in the world, that like often people do want you to like step up and lead because you have letters after your name, right? And it's just kind of the way that people actually look at letters after your name. And it's interesting, like when you mentioned stepping into the school, like from your perspective, you're just a newbie presumably, and you don't completely know what's going on. You have to figure it all out. But from their perspective, it's like, okay, here's the PhD, ready to fix it, kind of thing, right? Like, it sounds like they all look to you right away to like sort it out.
It didn't help that we were about to go on summer vacation, so there were very few people there. Because everyone, in France goes on vacation in August, and I started in July.
Right. That's funny.
But yeah, I think
so I wanted
so important. I think you're totally right, and I think that PhDs, we have a lot of leadership opportunities and a lot of leadership experience, but we don't use that word. And presenting at a conference is leadership. You're speaking in front of a crowd. You're answering questions. You're fielding questions. Organizing a conference. I know a lot of PhD students do that. I did that with a colleague in the history department. We had to manage a budget. We needed to invite speakers. We needed to reserve hotels. We needed to talk to the caterers. I mean, all of that is leadership. Teaching a class is leadership. It's more than that. I mean, it's management. You're managing students to try to get them from point A to point B. And I don't think anything prepared me for management as much as teaching. And I think that, we do all these things in PhD that you don't necessarily call by the right names, because in academia you've got a totally different jargon. Teaching is management. It's project management, it's preparation, it's curriculum design, it's managing a class, it's managing tempers, it's managing people.
That's so cool. I'm writing down, I just made a note of that we call things by the wrong names in academia. I love that. That's really awesome. That's such a good observation.
I remember we had the conversation too about transferable skills. I think that's the wrong name to call anything. And they're just skills.
Yeah, they're just skills. Yeah. You happen to be able to use them in both places, but yeah, that's fair. I wanted to come back to the question of purpose. So we were chatting a bit before the interview about this, and it's something that really underlies a lot of what I think about with Roostervane, just because I think for a lot of PhDs, especially still in the academy, we put a lot of stock in the academy being the place that you find purpose. So I love to ask this question to people who have left, and I've heard a lot of different answers about it. But I'd love to know, like, where you find the purpose in the work that you do, either like your actual job or just other things, and kind of like what like it means to you, and kind of like what you love about it. I'd even love to know what you hate about it, which is another question. But yeah, where do you find your purpose these days outside of academia?
I think, well, since I'm still working in education, I think the first answer is with the students. I
Mm,
just, and all the work I do in my full-time job and in my side gigs, I just love working with students. I love seeing students grow. And I think that's one of the reasons why I mean, I think I would have
mm,
accepted any job that I had gotten in Paris because that was where I wanted to be. But I'm glad I got to stay in higher education because I think it's so important. I think there's just nothing more rewarding than working with students, any age. Like right now, I work with high school students, college students, and even graduate students, and every age. I just find it so rewarding. And one of the reasons why I really love the job that I have and why I've stayed despite getting, now I've just gotten a second offer. But one of the reasons I stayed was because I really love this relationship with the students, and especially on a larger scale. As a professor at a university, I
mm,
might have been able to influence a classroom full of students. But here, I get to deal with all the students at the school. I get to have them all in a room. Well, not now with COVID, but I have to split it into multiple sessions. But I get to have them right at the beginning on their first day and tell them about what they're going to do in their years as students at the school. I get to have them in class. Sometimes I teach them in classes. I get to have them when they failed. I get to deal with them crying and begging for second chances. I get to have them when they're really successful in my office and give them awards. I get to hand them their diplomas, and I get to see where they go. I get to be there. I get to get those emails when they say, I just made my first movie," or look, I made this. I wrote this song and it won a prize. I'd love for you to listen to it. It's so rewarding, and especially I think on the larger scale. I think that leaving the sort of traditional faculty path has allowed me to get more purpose than I would have, because I mean, it's super rewarding teaching,
mm.
but now I get to do the teaching and I get to do all this other stuff.
That's awesome. That's really fantastic. So what advice would you have to somebody who's kind of where you were when you were in your maybe third year, or maybe somebody who's watching this still in their PhD and just thinking to themselves, oh crap, I might actually need another plan here?
I would say not to even think of it in terms of plans. Go back
Mm,
to the mentality you were in when you were leaving college, right? Grad school probably wasn't your one and only plan. You were probably considering multiple options in case you didn't get into graduate school. I think that
mm,
mindset is really important, that there's not one path that you'll be happy in. Just when you were applying to college, even, I remember when I was applying to college, I thought Princeton was the school. I only wanted to go to Princeton. I didn't get into Princeton. It crushed me. I ended up doing my
mm,
PhD at Princeton, and Princeton paid me to go there for years. um, I wouldn't go back and do it another way, and there's no way for me to know if I would have been happier as an undergrad at Princeton than as an undergrad at Hopkins, which is where I ended up. And I think that it's certainly true for that, and it's true for where I am now. I'm very, very happy now. I don't know if I would have been happier if I'd gotten that dream job my first year on the job market. I think I would have been happy. I think I probably would have been just as happy as I am now. So I
yeah.
think try not to put all of your emotional eggs in that one academic basket, because there's plenty of fulfilling careers everywhere. Probably tons that you didn't even know existed. I know that I didn't know that the job I have
Yeah.
now that exists, and now I'm in France, and I see that every school has someone in this position, and it's a really great position. I would recommend it. Um, and so I'd say, yeah, try to get out of that mindset that it's a plan B. Everyone should
Yeah,
have multiple
that's awesome.
plans.
Natalie, yeah, yeah, for sure. Natalie, thank you so much for doing this, having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks again for having me. It's always really fun.
It really is. All right. Well, take care, and we'll chat soon.
Awesome.
Awesome.